Director of Program and Education at Cancer Support Community. Dawn, my colleague, is also assisting with today's session. Please send us a message to our hosts using the Zoom chat if you experience any technical issues during the session. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items for you. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing after the event. All webinar attendees will receive an email with a link to the recording, as well as a PDF version of the slides. Please note that continuing education credits can only be earned through attending this live session, not by watching the recording. If you wish to receive one continuing education credit from participating in this session, you must complete an online evaluation and claim credit form. The link will be provided at the conclusion of the webinar. Once you submit the evaluation, a certificate for the total hour you earned will populate, and a copy will be sent to your email address. Statements of credit will be awarded based on your attendance. The deadline to claim the credit is March 15th of this year. If you have any questions about this CE activity, please contact AKH Incorporated, and that information for AKH will be in the chat. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please do so using the Q&A feature in Zoom. We will do our best to address all questions during the question and answer period at the end of the presentation. To turn on closed captions, please click on the CC button in the Zoom toolbar. Now, I have the great privilege of introducing our speaker today. Lillie Shockney is a University Distinguished Service Professor of Breast Cancer and Professor of Surgery at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Her name is well known in the cancer field, especially in navigation, survivorship, patient-centered care, preservation of quality of life, end-of-life planning and care, improving the cancer patient's experience, breast cancer and clinical outcomes, and much more. She specializes in breast cancer care. She is a public speaker, and she has performed literary work, and notable roles she has held over the last 40 years are well known to many. She's a two-time breast cancer survivor herself, originally diagnosed in her 30s. And Lillie has worked since then tirelessly to improve the care of breast cancer patients around the world. She has worked at Johns Hopkins since 1983. Lillie takes great pride in the Academy of Oncology Nurse and Patient Navigators, known as HON-ONN, which has more than 9,000 members. She has served as a consultant for breast cancer for national ABC News and Good Morning America, and has been also consulted regularly by the Today Show and CNN. Lillie serves on 28 medical advisory boards. A documentary was made about 3 key components of her life's work over a 5-year period, and this was completed in 2022. It launched to audiences nationally and internationally this past year, and it's called Lillie Shockney, Breakthrough Women in Science and Medicine. It is my great privilege to introduce my friend and colleague, Lillie.
Thank you ever so much, Rachel. I appreciate that. So to let you know, the documentary is right now embargoed while we wait for public television to air it first. NETA, which is the parent company for all public television actually around the world, endorsed it a week and a half ago. And so it will be going out and you'll see it on public television. Then after that, you'll see it on local television, then national television, and then cable. It also will be pushed out to medical schools, universities, and even 70,000 high school libraries. So I'm quite excited about that. So today, first, I appreciate you joining me, because that tells me that you're interested in learning how to help your patients prepare for end of life. I have no disclosures. So my objectives that I'm hoping that you will come away with today is to learn and be able to apply the 9 elements that need to be achieved in order to experience a good and peaceful death. Understand the importance of helping your patients transition through phases of hope. Recognize the importance of honesty and frankness. Learn and appreciate the profoundness of the end-of-life experience and how to feel proud you have supported your patient in the way they most needed and deserved. Understand the value of conducting metastatic retreats to help patients to plan for end of life. Learn how planning for end of life restores control to patients during a time that they feel like everything is truly out of control. Understand why palliative care is a priority and must begin early in the patient's care. Learn the art and science of giving bad news. Experience through example how to have to deliver patient-centered care as part of end-of-life care. Learn how to determine the right timing to discuss hospice engagement, and experience through example how to take pride in fulfilling patients' life goals through alternative ways. So let's start from the beginning, because the very first thing that happens to a patient when they learn that they have developed stage 4 disease is that they're in shock. And if this is a recurrence of their disease, or as we call it, a distant recurrence, they're probably angry because if they did all the treatments that we told them to do initially, they're not happy campers. They feel like that they did everything we said and still they're in a situation that they weren't planning to find themselves in. They also fear the dying process, not so much actually fearing death, but fearing what the dying process is going to be like, particularly fearing pain and suffering. Loss of identity. I was a mother, a school teacher, a wife, a daughter, and now I'm a metastatic cancer patient. They have questions and they want those questions answered. How long will I live is the most common thing that somebody's going to ask. And a physician that's talking with them may say, well, we really don't know. When in fact, we do know. If we've taken care of enough patients with this kind of cancer and their prognostic factors, we can guesstimate, give some type of close prediction. And patients do deserve to know that answer as best we can deliver it. Because what they're really saying is, I need time to plan. How much time do I have to plan? Why can't the doctor be more specific rather than just saying, well, we'll wait and see? Why aren't you treating me aggressively with the goal of curing me? Because that's what you did before. Why didn't the drugs I received for my early stage cancer, why didn't they work? So they put all their eggs in that basket. Maybe you didn't completely understand that there's no guarantee that everything's going to work 100%. And yet sometimes we do need to reiterate that while they're receiving their treatment for early stage cancer. And third, the need for education. We need to educate the patient and family about the philosophy of treating metastatic disease, that the goal is control and not cure. Whenever possible, we want to treat it as a chronic illness, unless it is so advanced or a type of cancer that grows very rapidly, for example, advanced pancreatic cancer. So that if it is as a chronic illness, and 70% of women with metastatic breast cancer today have ER positive, HER2 negative breast cancer, and we can treat them with a new drug category that is going to actually enable us to treat them with as this being a chronic illness. They're going to live even a decade. I have a patient right now who's entered her 2nd decade. And her scans have been NED, no evidence of disease, now for 3 years. So I got her a t-shirt that says, I live with Ned, I'm in love with Ned, I sleep with Ned, ask me about Ned. So when she's in the grocery store, somebody will say, who's Ned? And she'll say, let me explain to you about Ned. It means no evidence of disease. And I get my scans and this is what's happening and I'm on these medicines, etc. So it's an opportunity to be a teaching point, and that's what she wanted to be able to do. So the goal is control of the cancer, but also we want to preserve quality of life. So this individual's body lives in harmony with their cancer. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes physicians will decide, let's take on this disease with such a vengeance that the patient has lost their quality of life and they are existing, but frankly, they are not living. Next are money issues. Great concerns about financial issues, out-of-pocket expenses for treatment, missing time from work so that their paycheck is short. That could be a big problem. Also losing their identity as to whatever their career path has been. Risk of losing their health insurance through their employer is a very big worry. And we may say, oh, you'll be able to get insurance through other means. The premiums may be so ridiculous that they really can't. And fear of losing their job, which is also tied to their identity. Now, palliative care, what is it and when should it start? There's so many misconceptions about palliative care. I know when I asked my dad, tell me what palliative care is when he was dealing with his advanced cancer. He says, I know what that is. That's where they put you in a room alone in a bed, hospital bed with the side rails up so you can't get out. Forget about safety. And they hook you up to an IV that's got morphine in it that's dripping in you all the time so you're sleeping. And then someone is assigned, broke my heart to hear him say the word assigned. Someone is assigned to check on you every 24 hours to see when you died. That's palliative care. I thought, wow, I'm not going to use the term palliative care around my dad. And I'll tell you more about that in a few moments. All of their treatment will now actually be palliative treatment. And the doctor probably hasn't used the word palliative in saying your treatment is palliative, and all the chemotherapy and everything else that we're going to do to you is treatment to get the disease in control and not for the purpose of cure, because we aren't able to accomplish that at this day and time. It's a future goal. Palliative care is symptom management by specialists who strive to focus on alternative ways to control symptoms rather than using opioids. And palliative care is commonly associated with hospice. We need to disconnect those two things. Though it is part of hospice care, it also is freestanding and needs to be implemented, frankly, when we find out that somebody has advanced disease. It should start off very early on to let them know this person's part of your team, and we're going to have you meeting with them just to find out what they can do for you. And then as symptoms progress, we're going to directly engage them. These people truly should be seen as key members of the treatment team, as should also the patient. The patient must be a member of their own team. We don't want to do things to him or her. We want to do things with them. And I don't call it palliative care. I call it quality of life preservation or quality of life restoration, because that really is what the goal of palliative care is. So now I'll share a story with you about my dad. As I said, he had metastatic cancer, and that is what he died of several years ago. He had coughed, and my mother said it wasn't a big cough. It was more like he was clearing his throat, but he went, ow, my back hurts. And he went to bed and he said, my back really hurts bad. I don't feel like getting up. Bring me some soup and I'll eat it here in the bed. And I don't want any company. I don't feel well. And my mother knew she was supposed to contact me whenever there was a change, but my father ordered her to contact the medical oncologist because he wanted pain medicine. So the doctor put him on opioids. And this was day 3, and I still had not yet been called. And finally, my mother called me and she said, your dad says he doesn't want to live like this anymore. He's got really bad back pain. And when he takes the pills that the doctor ordered for him, he just sleeps. And he says, I don't want to exist. I want to still be living. Please go to the closet and get my revolver. I'm going to end my problem right now. And my dad had had 2 suicide attempts long before he ever had cancer. So my mother knew he meant what he said. And that's when she called me. And I said, well, first, don't give him the revolver. and read me the prescription bottle, what he was given to take. And I thought, oh yeah, no wonder he's sleeping around the clock. So I said, give him the phone and let me talk to him. So I said, you know, Dad, describe to me exactly where the pain is and the severity of the pain, what seems to trigger the pain. Has the pain improved with the narcotics that you're taking? And he said, I really don't want to be here anymore. If this is how I'm going to live, forget it. I don't want to be here anymore. So I said, I'm going to arrange for you to meet with our quality of life coach. His name is Tom, and I'm going to book you for an urgent consultation tomorrow morning. He creates slots before he has his regular clinic for urgent add-ons. And he says, quality of life coach. Well, I don't have any quality of life. I definitely want to see this man, Tom. So I got in touch with Tom and I said, my dad is a German farmer, very stubborn man. He taught me at the young age of 6, if you are not productive, you should be dead. And I said, and I've had to follow that philosophy all of my life. I said, he took me out in the cow barn, showed me how to milk 43 cows before I went to school in the morning, milk them again when I got off from school, and then be out in the fields on the weekend and working in the cow barns also on the weekend, and said, you know, you now will learn the life of the family with having a dairy farm. And so I told him, I said, he wants to take his life, and this is why, and his medical oncologist has put him on these drugs, which has him sleeping all the time. So can you tell me, do you know anything about farming? And he says, I grew up on a goat farm. I said, I'll take it. Anything that says farm in it, I'll take it. I said, I want you, I said, I then told him what my dad thought palliative care was, and he went, oh my. I said, so I want your white coat off because it has embroidered on it, says palliative care. I want your ID badge off. It says palliative care. Do you own a John Deere lawnmower? Yes. I want you to wear a John Deere hat because I know they give you a hat when you buy anything John Deere. Yes. I said, you're going to come in the consult room. You are Tom, the quality of life coach, who previously grew up on a goat farm. And he went, okay. So before he saw him, he did a scan, did some x-rays. He came in, he examined Dad, told him he had previously been a goat farmer. Now he was a quality of life coach. And as he pushed on Dad's back, he said, I imagine it hurts most at this spot, T5. And I'm right in front of my father holding him. And my father says he knows that because he was a goat farmer before he came here to work at Johns Hopkins. And I said, yes. So he asks key questions, which we have on the back of our ID badges. And I hope no one at Hopkins has to look at their ID badge anymore. We've had these on there for 16 years. He asks, how much do you know about your cancer? So we can make sure that patients do understand what they have. Like for breast cancer patients, a patient might say to me, I have breast cancer and bone cancer and lung cancer. No, your breast cancer cells that have spread to these other organs. How much do you want to know about your cancer? Some people want to know everything. Some people want just-in-time information. Then we ask questions. What are you hoping for right now? What are you most worried about right now? And tell me 3 things that bring you joy or brought you joy before you became sicker. And when we got to those questions with my dad, he said, I like doing my own wheeling and dealing. He said, I provide farm loans to young men when the bank won't take a risk on them. He says, I don't give everybody a farm loan. He said, I've been doing this for almost 40 years. He said, but I size them up and decide if they're worth taking a risk on. He said, I haven't guessed wrong yet, but right now I've got 2 young men that want to go in partners and be farmers. And they need a farm loan in order to buy this farm that they've been looking at. And my brain is so messed up with these drugs, I can't think straight. And I'm not going to have anybody else make this decision for me. So I'm just putting them off. And he says, I love spending time with my granddaughter and 2 great-grandchildren, which is my daughter and 2 grandkids. At that time, the children were 3 and 5 years old. And he said, they came to visit me yesterday. They drove almost 4 hours each way to visit me. And I slept through their visit because I was in bed and was in such pain, and I had taken the pain pills. And he said, I feel very guilty that they came all that way, and then I wasn't well enough to visit. He said, and then my third joy, he says, is probably the most important one to me. I love being a farmer. I grow corn and soybeans, and I can't do that. And if I can't do that, I don't want to be here anymore. And Tom said to my dad, those three joys that you have lost, we need to restore, because that's how you are measuring your quality of life. And we are going to restore those three goals for you. And I thought, how? Maybe we can, have him do a farm loan, taking him off of the drugs for a while, but he'll be in pain. Maybe we can do the same thing with having the 2 great-grandchildren and granddaughter come and visit, but get him back out on equipment? No way. I thought that's not possible. I thought, I wonder if we're going to give him a hallucinogenic drug and let him smell diesel fuel and corn husks, so he thinks he's out there picking corn. So Tom said, as you know, I took some x-rays and a scan. I see exactly where the problem is. And he says, and on my clinical exam, I've confirmed where the problem is. And I am more than 90% confident that doing vertebroplasties and nerve blocks would take away all of your pain. And I said, Tom, do you mean it? My father said, do it now. And he says, well, with your permission, we're going to do it tomorrow morning. And he says, now let me talk about farming. He said, you've done many farm loans. Yes, I have. And he said, have you ever asked any of these men that have become farmers to help you farm? No, I haven't. He said, this is the time to be asking, because I can't have you out there 8 to 10 hours a day. To start, I want you to just be out there for 30 minutes a day till we can graduate you up to a maximum of 3 hours a day. And I know you need to pick a lot of corn, and I know you have a lot of soybeans. You're picking 1,100 acres by yourself. He said, so let's identify some of these farmers that you gave farm loans to 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and give them the privilege of helping you, of paying you back for doing what you did for them. And Dad was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I could do that. And my mother said, of course we will do that. And he then asked him, he said, how old is your equipment? And my father said, I buy a new combine and a new tractor every 2 years. He said, excellent. He says, then you have a cab on your combine and on your tractor. Yes. It has the safety features. If you fell over, everything shuts off. Yes. He said, no, that first step up onto the ladder is about 18 inches and you're only 5'5". That's going to make your back way unstable. And he looked at me, he says, Lillie, can you have someone add an extension ladder to that so that he's stepping up just 6 inches on each step? And I said, yes, I can. Tom didn't learn all of that from being a goat farmer. He went online to learn about being a field corn and soybean farmer so he could take care of this patient. He truly did deliver patient-centered care. So the next day, my father had those procedures. 10 days later, my dad called Tom, cell phone to cell phone, and said, guess where I am? And Tom said, I can hear where you are. You're out in the field. What are you picking? I'm picking field corn. He said, my wife's at the end of the turn row. She bought a stopwatch, so we didn't argue about how long 30 minutes was. I did a farm loan this morning with those 2 young men that I think will become wonderful farmers. And when I finish here and we go back to the farmhouse later this afternoon, after I take a nap, my granddaughter and 2 great-grandchildren will be coming to visit me. Life is good again. Thank you for giving me my life back. That's palliative care. Who wouldn't want that? So strengths of palliative care providers, they also specialize in talking about the tough stuff when the oncologist treating the patient isn't comfortable doing so, unfortunately. An example is a patient who asked, is this treatment number 5 of 6 treatments available to me, or is it treatment number 5 of 16 treatments? And the oncologist's response in West Virginia was, we don't have to talk about that today. But the patient did want to talk about it. And when she attended one of my retreats and told me this story that first evening, I said, this was important to you to know. Tell me why you wanted to know when you met with your doctor 2 days ago. And she said, because I have 5 children under the age of 12. I homeschool them. I do not have a husband. My mother lives with me. She has MS, and I definitely don't think that my mother is going to be able to raise my children. So obviously this patient says to me, I need time to make arrangements for someone to adopt my kids. And I don't know how much time I have. And I was like, wow. Whereas palliative care doctors are very comfortable digging into that. And I hope that you're comfortable digging into that. We need to train oncologists to learn this skill rather than avoid these discussions. So I had her go back to that medical oncologist the following week and say, we're going to pick up where we left off. I need to know how many more treatments I have. His answer was, this is the last one. And she said, for God's sake, I have 5 children. I am not married. I'm taking care of my mother with MS. And he said, I'm so sorry, I didn't know that. And I thought, wrong answer. Don't say I'm so sorry. And certainly don't say I didn't know that when these are questions that should be asked up front. And so I've also given you those questions that we ask all of our patients. The last 3, we ask each time we see a patient with metastatic disease for their continued care, because those answers are going to change over time. Looks are deceiving. So patients are looking quite well and being managed on therapies that are not as toxic, maybe still working and still socializing and doing other things. Their coworkers, their friends, other individuals they may see periodically might say to them, you look great, your cancer's gone, right? Or when will you be done with your treatments? And this makes these individuals very angry, even if they don't verbalize it. But it happens every single day. It's very aggravating, and we need to teach them some talking points to use, such as, well, actually, I will never be done treatment until I make that decision to stop and enroll in hospice care, which is always shocking for somebody to hear. Or saying, you know, looks could be deceiving. I'm fortunate right now, I'm on a treatment that isn't making me really sick. Or you probably think this is my real hair, and it isn't. It's a really good wig. But to educate others rather than avoiding them or isolating yourself. It's just not a good idea. These individuals don't fit attending survivorship celebrations either. Their family wants to take them to some survivor celebration, a race for the cure, do this, do that. They don't fit, and they don't want to be there. They're going to be around other people that are survivors who are and do appear to be cancer-free and are still fussing about, like for breast cancer patients, fussing in the bathroom about, oh, I'm still having these terrible hot flashes. And, you know, I hope that that doesn't happen when I go on the cruise. And I'm up for a promotion. I'm so excited about that. I was in the bathroom at a race for the cure. And in my little stall, when I saw a wheelchair roll by me and go into the handicap stall, and 2 women were up there at the sink, and they were fussing about hormone therapy they were taking, and their vacation plans and their promotions and all of this. And I heard the stall door on the handicap door open like John Wayne just threw it open. And this woman in the wheelchair rolled out. I still couldn't see her. I was still hunkered down in my own stall, but she rolled herself over to those 2 women at the sink and told them to shut up. She used some profanity even I haven't used, and said, you don't know how lucky you are. I was forced to come here by my sister. She put me in a wheelchair. She brought me here. I will never be able to say, you know, gee, I am having hot flashes. Isn't it terrible? I'm not going to get a promotion. I am no longer employed. I'm not going to be taking a vacation. So you 2 women need to shut up and be thankful for what you've got. And for breast, it's very unusual that someone would embrace pink. They usually call themselves, I like the other pink, or I am the other pink, which is an interesting way to see themselves. So I want to talk about phases of hope, because that was one of the objectives that I listed for you. There are phases of hope. But let's first start with, where does hope come from? What's the origin of hope? The origin of hope comes actually from Pandora's box. So I'm sure you've heard of Pandora's box, but you may not have heard the story about that box. And it basically is this. Zeus, who was a Greek god, was quite taken with Pandora, who was a beautiful Greek goddess, and he gave her many, many gifts, gems and jewels and gold and lovely things. And one day he presented her with a box. And he said, the gift is the box and not what's in it. Don't ever open the box. But she was a girl. And she thought, gee, he gave me some other things that were just gorgeous. And this does have a beautiful gem covered top on it. I'm just going to peek. So she cracked it open just a hair, and out of that box flew all of the diseases, disorders, and evilness into the world. And she slammed it shut, and the only thing left in the box was hope. And that is the origin of hope. So what are patients initially hoping for? They're really initially hoping for a miracle. I want to be that miracle patient, that 1 out of a million. I have seen 2 miracles personally, so I know they can happen, but I don't put my eggs in the miracle basket, and I don't allow a patient to put all of their eggs into that miracle basket either and leave them in there for a long time. So we can hop on that wagon for a little while, usually through the first line of therapy, and see how much does it shrink the disease, how are they doing, is this going to buy time, is it going to preserve quality of life? And then next, when we say, gee, I don't think the miracle is going to happen, now we want to work with them and hope for normal longevity of living in harmony with their cancer, maintaining good quality of life. So live out into the 70s and 80s, hopefully. But then there will be a point, usually, where treatments are not working as well as they had been initially. And now they're starting to blow through lines of therapy. That's where we need to have a sit down that's a much more serious conversation, a very honest, open, frank conversation. Talk about hope for quality of life, which needs to be the priority instead of quantity, recognizing now that having received many lines of therapy, that his or her life will likely be shorter than desired, and that we really do want to focus on quality of life. And then finally, hope for orchestrating a peaceful and good death with all of the elements of a good death fulfilled, which requires planning and time. They cannot be done in a weekend. So if a doctor says, I think it's time when you enrolled in hospice, and we still see in the United States, the average number of days that someone receives hospice care is 5 days, not because the patient says, I'd like hospice now, or they developed any criteria for it, which my dad did develop it. But instead, it's because they're too sick to get another treatment. So it's like a default plan. I'm so sorry, it's time for hospice. I haven't said I'm so sorry for over 20 years. And I'm hoping that you won't need to say that either, if we help our patients fulfill these 9 elements. Knowing your purpose for living and it was valued by at least one other person. Leaving a legacy unrelated to leaving money for something. It might be a philosophy. For my dad, one of his legacies was being the patriarch for farmers for the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And he wrote his own obituary, and he wrote that in his obituary. So I knew he had truly embraced his legacy, which was wonderful. Being pain-free, back to palliative care. Dying with dignity in the environment of their own choosing. We only asked 24% of patients where they want to die. Of those that we asked, 91% say that they want to die at home with hospice care. 23% of cancer patients die in an ICU on a ventilator, which means nobody asked anything, and that's shameful. Having legal and financial affairs in order. A physician may say, it's time to get your affairs in order. That could be 5 days before they're probably going to die. And the patient will nod their head, okay. Well, what does that mean? Do I need a lawyer? Do I need a tax accountant, a financial planner? Does it cost money? Can I do it myself? And in trying to figure that out, it usually doesn't happen. And that is a nightmare for the family. I want a federal law that requires that the family meet with the treating doctor 1 month, 6 months, and 1 year post their loved one's death and have that family tell them honestly how things went and what could that doctor do better in taking care of future patients, because the doctor never sees that family again. They never see them. They never know if things went well or things did not go well. Leaving no financial debt associated with cancer treatments. That is very important to the patient. But a patient might get, well, kind of conned by their family, adult children that'll say, Bob, I want you to do another treatment. Don't give up yet. Don't give up yet. Do it for me. If you love me, you'll do another treatment. And the patient is just feeling so whipped. She doesn't have any fight left to fight to say, I don't want to do another treatment. I want to be in hospice at home and extend my life, because I know doing more treatments is going to make me sicker and I probably will die sooner, which is what happens. And the daughter will say, don't worry about the expense. My brother and I will take care of it. Did she talk to her brother about that? No. Their mother dies. And then the daughter says to her brother, by the way, I told Mom that you and I would take care of that $50,000. And since you make 4 times what I make, we're going to prorate it. So I'll pay 25% and you pay 75%. And they never speak to one another again. Feeling confident you will be spoken of fondly after you're gone. That's the only one my father had a problem with. He said, I got a problem with that one. I said, tell me about that. And he said, well, you know that farmer, Mr. Clark, that I've sparred with all my life. I said, yep, I do. I remember the day you put a feral cat in his mailbox and watched with binoculars when he went down to get his mail and opened that door on that mailbox, and that cat ricocheted all around in his cab. And he went back up to the house after he got the cat out of the truck. And then he came over to visit you. And he said, how dare you put a cat in my mailbox? Look at my face. And my father said back to him, you must be drunk. What are you talking about? A cat in a mailbox. So I said, well, why don't you think he would be, speaking fondly of you because of that? And he said, well, I told him I was going to piss on his grave, and I did. And I was like, oh my God. I said, well, Daddy, has he died? Yes. You did this after he died? Well, yeah, there's no sense in doing that if he wasn't dead. I said, well, then technically he's not here to talk about you. He said, oh, good. Put a check mark then beside that one. I learned much more than I wanted to know about my dad that day and what he had done. Feeling spiritually connected to a higher power, which for some happens early on, for others, it happens at the nth hour. I haven't seen it not happen, thankfully, but it's not something that I push. And last is giving forgiveness and receiving forgiveness, which does not mean that the patient has to forgive everyone that's done them a wrong or that they feel that has done them wrong, and vice versa. They don't have to forgive someone that they feel has done them wrong. My father chose not to forgive his only living sibling for something she had done 47 years ago. And I said, well, Dad, I do want you to call her. You haven't spoken to her for 47 years. And just tell her that you're still angry with her. And he said, no, I don't need to. I've taken care of it. And I said, what do you mean you've taken care of it? He said, she'll know I haven't forgiven her. Did you write her a letter? Nope. Don't worry about it. It's taken care of. He wrote it in his obituary. He wrote out her whole name and said that he still had not forgiven her and that she knows why, and that she cannot come to his burial service. Well, that certainly entertained all of Kent County in the newspaper. I was like, wow. All stage 4 cancer patients' progression of disease, as we know, is not the same. And today for metastatic breast cancer patients, they're very confused that one woman with stage 4 died in a year and others may be living more than a decade. And it's because of the prognostic factors that they have that match up to the new treatments that we have. They really do put metastatic breast cancer patients into 2 categories. Those that are going to live a much shorter period of time and have a very rocky road, and those that we're going to be able to treat this as a chronic illness like diabetes and COPD. And I even break them apart for metastatic discussions because they can't relate to one another, just like metastatic patients cannot relate to those that had early diagnoses that we believe are cancer-free. So we need to educate them about the prognostic factors and where the disease is and how aggressive it is or isn't, and what treatments are available to manage it. And so what are their life goals? We must know the patient's life goals that they have in their future and milestones that are coming up in the coming months. We need to work around those milestones so that they are preserved. So if a patient with advanced disease says, my daughter's getting married in 2 weeks, we're going to give them a drug holiday, for heaven's sakes. And we're definitely not going to start them on a new therapy. It's going to give them serious diarrhea, or they are not going to watch her walk down the aisle, are they? That isn't going to happen. She deserves a drug holiday. We also want to preserve her energy and teach her family how to do energy conservation, which rehabilitation therapists are very talented at being able to show them how to do. And for life goals, let's help her fulfill them in alternative ways. I have patients get cards for their children for each milestone that they're going to reach. I used to have patients go to card stores, but cards are awfully expensive. So now I do card drives for each milestone that these youngsters are going to achieve when they get their driver's license, when they graduate from high school, when they graduate from college, get their first career job, when they get married, when they have their first baby. What do you want to tell your child on that day? And they are still here instilling their values in their children. And I am privileged to hear from adult children who tell me how important these cards have been in their life and that they feel the presence of their mother and her words of wisdom all the time. Now we're going to watch a video about one of our metastatic breast cancer retreats.
There's some interesting history regarding this particular retreat that we refer to as the Metastatic Couples Retreat. For more than a decade, I've been conducting survivor retreats for women stage 0 to 3, and we've been holding them here at this facility, Bon Secours Spiritual Center, a very relaxing environment, peaceful environment. But I would get emails from women, some I knew, some I did not, saying, when is the retreat for me? I have metastatic disease.
When I'd throw my little pity party or whatever at the beginning, and I had that moment of, why is this happening to me? Why does this have to happen to me? I'm young, I have 2 young kids, why do I have to be the one going through this? And his response was, it's not happening to you, it's happening to us.
What are the biggest things that they're worrying about as they continue to travel forward, recognizing that eventually they will die of this disease?
I think I was in denial that it can't just be cured and be over with. And I know it's a long road ahead.
I think that's both our best way of coping with things is through humor, which really throws the doctors off and the nurses and our friends and, because, yeah, a lot of them say the same thing, like, you're always happy, you're always smiling, everything looks great, you look like you just lost a bet and shaved your head.
Some of the activities that we provide for these couples is an opportunity for them to candidly speak with others in the same situation they have. So we actually break the couples apart. We will have women only in one room, men only in another room. I think that the men only is one of the most powerful things that we do at this event. Men are thirsty to find other men in the same situation. There is a sense of relief when they hear a husband say, this is how I've been dealing with this. I get in my car and I scream and cry and curse. And to find out that all of them get in their car and scream and cry and curse, that they're not alone.
You never do fully recover. There's always the new normal, and then they start coming at a faster pace. So as time goes on, it's taking away another chunk of the life you had together and of what your wife used to be able to do.
It's harder and harder to see a positive future.
And then in bringing them together, it's who feels comfortable in talking about any of those candid discussions that took place in the men's only and women's only room. And one by one, people around the room do speak up and do share.
We talked in our group about the loss of hair being, you know, something that people lose their public face, but I've lost my public face and body, and who is that person? I don't recognize her.
Well, I know it's inevitable, but it's hard to believe that I actually have it in my bones right now because I feel so good.
Right now, I feel like I'm responding to treatment so well that it's almost miraculous.
I don't want them to feel like I gave up. You know what I'm saying? I want them to always think that no matter what, I fought for them. You know?
I'd say that my biggest fear is for my husband, because, you know, at the end of it all, I'll be dead. That'll be easy. It's like going to sleep, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
We have provided information about how decisions are made and that physicians are not God, but also that physicians are hesitant to speak up and really give a time frame, even when in some cases they do know the time frame. Just as I have mentioned, I can see how ill some of these women are, and I can guesstimate how much longer they're going to be here.
I am bedridden for most of the day because of my pain and because of a great deal of fatigue. And I don't know how close I am to the end.
It's hard to face your own mortality.
The hardest part for me, I think, is probably the kids. I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. They were 1 and 2 when I first got diagnosed. And just not knowing if I'm going to be around to see them grow up, not knowing if I'm going to be around to even see them in kindergarten, you know, not knowing if they're going to remember who their mom is at the end of all this. That to me is hard. You know, I don't want them to forget me.
One of the things that we did in the women's only group was that I talked about women considering getting cards for their children, going to the store, asking to meet with the store manager of their card store and say, I'm going to succumb to this disease and I need your help. I want to select birthday cards for my children up through age, usually 21. When my child goes to communion for the first time, I want to have a card for that. When they get married, when they have their first child. And writing in those cards, what do you want to tell your child on that day, is a very powerful way to still be here instilling your values in your children. We also have some other sessions looking at some private moments, having massage, having Reiki therapy. We also play the Almost Newlywed game, which is a lot of fun. We're also going to be out on the labyrinth today. They have a beautiful stone labyrinth here. One of the interesting things when we do this for couples, we send the wives in first and then wait a few minutes and then send the husbands in. And at some point on the path, and it's a very specific walking path that you do, the husband and wife will meet. And how they interact with one another, whether they just brush by, whether they stop and hold one another, whether they stop and sob with one another, to me is a very strong symbolization of their love for one another. We also will have this afternoon the creation of memory ships. And what this entails is each of the patients will be given a vase in the shape of a hurricane lamp, and it has blue and green sea glass mounted all over the outside. The base is white with sand, and then embedded into that sand are seashells. They will be given a journal, a pink journal, and stones, pebbles, smaller rocks, seashells, and sea glass for them to use today as well as to take home a supply of. And I will ask each of them to go back in time as far back as they can remember. What was their first happy memory? I want them to record that in the journal and then select one of these objects to then go in this vase, which I tell them represents them. This vessel is a symbolization of them and their lives. Our memories are something we hold on to. We take them with us. We also leave them behind, and it's I think, a very powerful connection.
It's nice to have people that get it. You know, they understand what you're going through. They understand, even though it's not the exact same stage or the exact same disease.
It makes me happy to be able to talk about this because it's so wonderful that this is offered to people going through things like this. I mean, I wish it was more more spread and closer to home and all that other stuff, but it'll spread, you know, from all of us.
I'll be talking to them about the fact that they've all been in shark-infested waters. They come to Johns Hopkins or to their cancer center, which is a safe harbor, so we get them stabilized so they can set out to more ports of call. But that one day they will do a final sale that they must do alone. I will then give them on parchment paper a verse written by Henry Van Dyke. I always paraphrase that verse for them, and the verse goes like this. He talks about a family standing here on this shore, and they're at a dock and they see this huge, magnificent white ship in a dock, and they're watching as her cargo is getting loaded on, and they're really admiring her size and her grace. Cargo is done, the sails go up, the wind snaps the sails, and she sets out of the port out into the ocean. And they admire her even more in seeing her now so gracefully. She is going out further and further out into the water. And they watch her as she's going out all the way to the horizon line. And she gets smaller and smaller and smaller until then when someone says, she's gone. But gone where? She's only gone from our sight. She's just as large in mast and hull as she was when she was at our side, and just as able to carry her living freight to her new and final destination. Her size is diminished in us, but not in her. And as we stand here as family and friends and say, there she's gone, there's family and friends on the other shore sending up the glad shout, look, here she comes. It's a very powerful way to discuss death and to see death in a more peaceful manner. Every single husband who has attended these retreats has used that analogy and will call me and say, we found out today that her sails are up, or we found out that she's getting close to the horizon line. And then they will call me again and say, she's reached the other shore and what time, and who he believes was there waiting for her. And until we have a prevention, true prevention for this disease, I want to make sure these women are not forgotten survivors.
So let me answer two questions that have come in very quickly, and then I want to see if we've also got other questions. I hold two of these a year. One is for couples, spouses or partners. We usually do have at least one couple that are lesbian couple. We limit this to 12 patients and 12 loved ones. So it's an opportunity so that people can really get their questions answered and get individual time with me and the other facilitators that I have there. The other retreat is for patients who are not in a relationship. So they bring their female caregiver, which is commonly their mother, sister, daughter, or best friend. And obviously we don't do the almost newlywed game for that one. We do an art therapy session, which is quite profound, I will tell you as well. And I have done 33 of these. My next one is in April, and it is for patients bringing their female caregiver. Then our couples one will be in September. And I have helped other cancer centers launch these as well. And there is a program planning guide that I created that is online too. I've also helped other members of our Hopkins team to launch these for metastatic colorectal, advanced pancreatic, advanced GYN oncology. And then in 2022, I launched our first one for advanced prostate cancer patients and their spouses or partners. Half of those gentlemen that came were in a gay relationship. Some were married, some were not. But it was a really great retreat. So what I've learned is that experience from these retreats has taught us that the biggest concern is that pain and suffering and no way to get away from it, which helps us to discuss palliative care more openly. Family members concerned of witnessing it, again, discussion about palliative care. And this is the perfect segue into talking about the myths and also talking about the importance of those 9 elements and them getting closure. So I'm going to close here and ask, let's see, I only see 2 questions and I've answered those 2 questions. I don't know if anyone has any more questions or not.
Lillie, one more question that we do have, but first I want to thank you so much for this amazing presentation. And we only have a minute or 2 left. But if we can just end, I think it would be a perfect ending in terms of, can you just tell us maybe 2 or 3 steps that we as oncology professionals can take to become more comfortable with these end-of-life conversations? We know how difficult they are, and that they're challenging and they can be uncomfortable, but do you have 2 or 3 steps that you can just give us some tips on?
Yes. So the one thing that the patient wants is honesty. And when we are not honest, they lose trust in us, and they should. So that's really important, is fulfilling that expectation that they have of us in being honest. And even though we may be saying, you're probably looking at a 6-month length of time that you'll still be here. I could be wrong. That could be sooner. It could be later. But from my experience, and that's what we're going on, is from our experience or collective experience at that cancer center, that's probably what this individual is facing. And to tell them, I hope everyone can do as I've done and stop saying, I'm so sorry, you won't be here for I'm so sorry, I can't save your life. That means nothing. It's patronizing, quite frankly. And instead, it needs to be, I want to know your life goals so I can help you fulfill them in an alternative way. We're going to think out of the box here to figure out how to do this. You know, someone who was to be a grandfather in a few months, and he's not going to live long enough to do that. Let's have him meet the baby in ultrasound. Make that happen. I've made that happen now twice. And the patient was so appreciative of it, to get to meet his grandson and a woman meet her granddaughter in ultrasound and see that silhouette of that face that is amazing, and put their hand on right in the jelly of that, you know, mother-to-be's abdomen, and really do appreciate that. And to have cards and letters for those babies that aren't born yet, or for those young children that aren't are still young and aren't here yet. And if we do help them fulfill those 9 elements, I have my 9 elements fulfilled. I don't think I'm going to die from cancer anytime soon, but I could be hit by a truck. I like control, and fulfilling those 9 elements gives me control. I have cards for my grandchildren. They don't know that. My daughter doesn't know that. But again, control is something that we are thirsty for when we are approaching end of life. And those are ways that we could still be here, instilling our values and not being forgotten, as you heard the patient Rachel say in that video. In my slides, you will see a second video that is about the patients with their female, bringing their female caregivers. And you'll also see a slide that I did not have time to get to, and I'm sorry about that, but I wasn't going to play them for you, but they're 2 animated videos that are for patients to watch who have advanced disease. And it talks about how they can empower themselves, that they should be participating in decision making. They should make criteria. How do they want to decide when they want to stop treatment? And that stopping doesn't mean that you're giving up. It means you want to retake control of your life.
Perfect.
And that's what we need to focus on.
Lillie, unfortunately, we're at the end of time. We could talk to you for hours, but thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you to our audience for joining us. Please remember, if you wish to receive 1 continuing education credit from participating in this session, you must complete the online evaluation claim and credit form. You will find this link in the Zoom chat, as well in the message that will pop up in your browser after you leave the webinar. We thank everybody. Please focus on your patients, have those tough conversations. We here at Cancer Support Community to help give you education and guide you through those. And thank you for all that you do. We thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye.